Hey guys, today I want to go over 26 settings tips that you should definitely know about in Battlefield 2042, no matter if you just started playing or if you sticked around since launch. Just note that these are my personal recommendations and might not be perfect for everyone, so still play around with them and see what works best for you. And the first point you should definitely check, especially when you are new to the game, is the field of view and the ADS field of view. Both can be found at display and then video. And the field of view defines how much you can see of your surroundings, but also how close or far enemies appear. With a high FOV, you see more of your surroundings, but targets appear further away, which makes them smaller and harder to hit. Plus, you get this fisheye effect that some players don't like. And with a low FOV, it's the other way around, and you see less of your surroundings, which also means you have to turn more, but targets are closer and bigger and might be easier to hit. But it can also feel like running around with blinders and might cause motion sickness for some players. And while this setting is completely personal preference, I would recommend to start with a value between 80 and 90 and then work your way up or down in steps of 5 until you found something that fits for you. Just note that with different FOV values, you might also have to change your mouse or stick sensitivity since it affects how fast your turning appears. What's also worth checking is the ADS field of view, because this defines which FOV the game is using when you aim down sights. By default, this is turned on, which means you will have the same field of view when aiming down sights that you have when not aiming down sights, and the screen is only zoomed in by the magnification of your weapon's optic. With the option turned off, the game will use the default FOV instead, which is 55, plus the zoom you have on your weapon. However, I would recommend to keep it on, not only for a consistent FOV, no matter if aimed on sights or not, but also because the additional zoom can totally mess up your muscle memory and even cause motion sickness if you're sensitive to it. A bit further down the list, you can also find motion blur, chromatic aberration, and vignette, and I would recommend to turn all of this off for a much clearer picture. Moving on to the HUD, you should also turn down camera shake, because this defines how much your screen will shake from nearby explosions, but also from environmental events like the start of the rocket on orbital. And this can be really distracting and can also affect your aiming stability during gunfights, so turn it down to 20, which is the lowest possible value. Then you can set the colors for your enemies and also customize the primary and accent color of your HUD, which might be interesting for some players, so give it a shot if you don't like the default ones. If you like my color palette, simply set the colorblind mode to Tritanopia and that's it. Next up, you can activate the damage numbers, and that's a feature I would definitely recommend to use. By default, it's turned off, which doesn't allow you to see the actual damage you have dealt to an enemy, but here in the options you can set it to score log or screen sender. When score log is selected, the numbers appear in the same spot as your XP events and kills, and with screen sender they are shown around your crosshair. And that's also what I would recommend, since the crosshair is always in your line of sight. The size can be set to small, medium or large, but small should be big enough without being distracting. And you can also move the number around your crosshair if you don't like the position in the upper right corner. This is helpful to judge how much damage you have dealt to a target and how much you still need for a kill. A few lines below, you can also enable the all chat functionality in case you not only want to ride with your own team, but also with the enemy one. By default, it's disabled, so you have to actively enable it when you want to have a friendly chatter with a person that has already killed you 5 times in a row. And at the end of the list, you can scale all different kinds of HUD elements to your preference. And here I turned down most of them by about 15 to 25%, depending on the element, and only the log scale that shows the kills and the XP events and the minimap are still at 100. But the minimap only because there's a separate option to turn it down. When you play on an ultra-wide monitor, you might also want to check the horizontal HUD padding, because this allows you to adjust how far off the left and right side the HUD is. When set to 0, all elements will be positioned at the edges of the screen. When set to 100, the elements will be closer to the center. Next up are the crosshair settings, and here you might want to look into crosshair thickness and color. The thickness can be set to thin, medium or thick, with medium as the default value, but if you have a hard time seeing the crosshair in some situations, especially in bright environments, switch it to thick. If it is the other way around and the crosshair is too distracting, or you like the different style of the small crosshair like I do, then set it to thin. For the color, I would recommend something that doesn't naturally appear in the game, as this helps with crosshair visibility no matter the environment. So for example, a glowing pink or purple, but a bright green also works pretty well for me. An option to adjust the brightness of the red dot in optics is unfortunately not available. Then on the next tab you can adjust your minimap, which I think is important because the map is one of your best friends in 2042, and first setting is rotate with view. If turned on, like it is by default, the little arrow of your soldier always points towards the top of the map, while the map itself rotates around it. And when turned off, the top of the minimap always points to the north and your soldier icon is turning inside of it. Both options have their benefits, but I always found it easier to pin down the exact location of spotted enemies or find my way around the battlefield when the map rotates with my view. When turned off, on the other hand, you can also use it as a compass and turn off the additional one in the middle of the screen to reduce HUD elements. If you've never experimented with this, I highly recommend to do so, because it can really help you to react faster to situations with a lot of enemies around when you know how to read your minimap. The scale set to 85% for me, simply to make it a little bit smaller. A setting that is also important is the view distance, because it allows you to see more or less of the surrounding area and can be changed automatically or manually. When you are in a match, you can toggle the view distance with N on PC, the touchpad on PlayStation or the select button on Xbox, and this zooms the map in 3 stages or sets it to auto again. Auto means that game adjusts the distance depending on whether you are on foot, in a vehicle or in an aircraft, and when you manually set it, the distance is always kept the same. So I would recommend to keep the default distance at auto, then set the close distance to about 60, because 40 is always a bit too small. For ground vehicles, I would recommend double the amount, so 120 for me, and air vehicles at around 240. In addition, you can also scale the size of the icons shown on your minimap, for example yourself, your teammates and the red dots that are your enemies, but I would recommend to simply keep it at the default value. But you can also set if you want them to be scaled with your view distance, and this means with the option turned on, like it is by default, your soldier icon, the icons for your teammates, spotted enemies or any gadgets will be scaled up or down alongside of the map itself. When you turn it off, on the other hand, all icons will keep their size, no matter how far the map is zoomed in or out. And I would recommend turning it off, because especially with a high zoom, you can't see much anymore, and the only disadvantage of not scaling them is that some icons might disappear behind others, but red dots for enemies will always stay in front, so no worries about this. And when talking about icons, you can also reduce the amount of clusters on your screen with the settings for HUD icons. It allows you to adjust the opacity of them based on how close or far away they are from the center of your screen, which means icons in the center will be more transparent while icons at the edges are more visible. This prevents objective or gadget icons from blocking your view, and the effect is even higher when aiming down sights. For the zone size and center scale, I recommend to keep the default values, and at the opacities, I just lowered the peripheral and central a bit, and when zoomed, only the peripheral, because the value for central is already pretty low. Further down the list, you can also scale the size of all icons in case they are too big. Next up are the sound settings, and these are mostly personal preference again, but what I can recommend is to try out night mode, because I feel like this makes footsteps sound a bit clearer, especially when you prefer to keep your headset volume low like I do. And here you can also set custom music for your game and select between different music packages or completely randomize it. So if you don't like the current in-game music, just try something else. In the next tab, you can then enable voice chat in case you want to talk to your party of friends or to your random squad mates, but be aware that not many players use it, so you might have a hard time finding someone to talk to. Moving on to the gameplay and control settings now that you can find at mouse and keyboard or controller and then on foot. And the first point to talk about is uniform soldier aiming. This might be something that flies under the radar of most players, but it's an important setting you should definitely check. By default it's turned on, and what it does is that it dynamically adjusts your aim down sight sensitivity depending on the magnification of the optic you use, but without the need of changing one or more of the single zoom aim values at the bottom of the list. So when it is turned on and you set the coefficient down below to 0, a 6x scope will feel a lot slower than a 2x. And with a coefficient of 300, both optics feel almost the same in their sensitivity. But with the right value, it can give you a very consistent experience when aiming down sights, no matter which optic you use. And this can have a positive effect on your aim and also on building up muscle memory, especially when you frequently switch weapons or optics during a match. After a lot of testing and a bit of hit and miss, I went with a value of 120, but that's again a bit of personal preference. So what you should do is to test the values between 120 and 180 and see what works for you. Just choose a weapon you feel most comfortable with, equip 3 optics with different magnifications, and then go to No Name's Aim Trainer and shoot at the bots. After a while, you will find a value that feels natural across all 3 optics, and that's the one you should keep. If you have already changed any of the zoom aim values down below, I would recommend to set them back to 100 for now and only do some fine-tuning here later on if necessary. Further down the list, there is an option for sprint to vault over that I can recommend to turn on as well, especially if you have the feeling that you get stuck on small obstacles sometimes, because with this option your soldier will automatically vault over them when you are sprinting and you won't have to press the jump button. And right below there is always use Traversal sprint, and even though it might be tempting to turn this on and not have to press the button twice for Traversal sprint, I would highly recommend to keep this turned off, because when coming from the Traversal sprint you need a much longer time to start firing compared to the normal sprint or when walking. So only use Traversal sprint when you really need it, but not by default. Then at zoom, there is a setting I always recommend because it makes your life as a sniper a lot easier, and that's to bind steady scope to the same button as aim down sights. When doing this, your soldier holds breath in the moment you aim down sights with a sniper rifle, and you won't have to toggle or hold an additional button anymore. This is especially helpful on controller and when playing more aggressive as a sniper, because it actually gives you a similar advantage that the recon class has with their proficiency, but for all classes. To bind the key, just click at the steady scope mapping, then tap your aim down sights button, which should be LT or L2 on consoles, and the right mouse button on PC, and ignore the following message. It only tells you that the key is already bound to another function, which is aiming down sights, of course. And right below you can find the soldier zoom aim sensitivity, and this defines how much of your normal sensitivity is used when you aim down sights. I have set it to 90, which means that when I'm aiming down sights, 90% of my normal sensitivity is used, so it's a bit slower, but you can also go down to 80 or even lower if that feels right for you. It gives you the advantage of a faster sensitivity when moving and turning and a lower sensitivity when aiming down sights, and this value affects all weapons and optics and is basically the foundation for uniform soldier aiming. And another option you should not touch at all is parachute auto deploy, because even though it sounds good, it's just not reliable enough. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes the parachute gets triggered when it shouldn't and the other way around. So it's really inconsistent and can get you killed. A very good mechanic, on the other hand, is auto throw grenades and auto throw crates, because these settings will allow you to throw your grenade, throwing knife or crate instantly after toggling the button, and you won't have to pull the trigger in addition to it. If you still want to hold the grenade for a bit, you can simply hold the button, because it's only released from your hand when you release the button. Moving on to the vehicle tab, there is not an actual recommendation but a heads up on a setting, because the vehicle aim sensitivity is also connected to the controls of Liz TV missile, Crawford's turret and Casper's drone. So if you feel like one of these gadgets is too slow or too fast, you need to set a higher value for the vehicle sensitivity. But this also means when you change the value because your vehicle aim feels too slow or too fast, keep in mind that it will also affect these specialist gadgets. And one more option I definitely recommend to enable here is Decouple Aiming from turning. With the option turned off, like it is by default, your turret will automatically move alongside of the tank, which means when you try to aim at a certain point while the tank is turning, you have to work against the movement of the tank with your mouse or stick. With the option turned on, you have full control of the tank and the turret because they are not moving together anymore. When you aim at a point and turn the tank, only the body will turn. This option is really helpful and gives you so much more control over the vehicle and your aim. And at the end, 3 more options you can find at the Accessibility tab. And the first one is Reduce Sprint Camera Motion, which was added a while ago when the whole movement of the soldiers was changed and made a bit heavier. But if that gives you motion sickness or you simply don't like the more intense movement of the screen, enable this option here and the camera motion gets reduced. A few lines down below you can then find the Concussion Effect, which defines whether your screen will turn black or white when hit by a concussion grenade, and by default this is set to white, which can be really annoying and blinding when you usually play in a dimly lit room, so I would recommend to set it to black. And at the end, at the bottom of the list, you can adjust the visual and sound effect for Zain's trait. Cause when Zain is on low health and kills an enemy, he will instantly start to regenerate health, which comes with a visual effect where your screen turns a bit brighter and more colorful for a short amount of time, but also with a sound effect. The sound might not be annoying, but the visual effect can be, so if you were wondering what this is or if it is too distracting for you, just turn it down here. And that's it for today. I hope this video and all the explanations help you to find the best settings for you and your playstyle. And if it does, don't forget to drop a like or a comment below and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Until then, thanks for watching and thanks to my members for the additional support. I'm Catwoman and you are awesome.